Founding and History of the United States of America. Introduction. The history of the United States is a rich and complex saga, and studying its past is essential to understanding the country's present. This blog post will comprehensively examine the history of the United States from its founding to the present day, charting the country's political, social, and economic development, major events, and defining personalities. The colonial period, the arrival of the Europeans. The history of the United States began in the 15th and 16th centuries, when European explorers set foot on the continent. In 1607, the English established the first permanent colony at Jamestown, Virginia, marking the beginning of permanent English settlement in North America. Growth of the colonies. During the 17th and 18th centuries, the British established a series of colonies along the Atlantic coast. These colonies were diverse and ranged from agricultural colonies like Virginia and Maryland to trading colonies like Massachusetts and Pennsylvania. British control. The colonies were under the control of Great Britain, and the British Parliament made laws on their behalf. Colonists became increasingly dissatisfied with British rule, feeling that they were taxed without representation and denied other rights. French and Indian War. The French and Indian War of 1754-1763 was a conflict for territory between the colonies and Britain and their French and Indian allies. The war ended in victory for Britain, which gained control of the Ohio River Valley. American Revolution, 1775 to 1783. Declaration of Independence. The French and Indian War led to growing resentment against British rule in the colonies. On July 4, 1776, the colonies declared their independence from Great Britain by adopting the United States Declaration of Independence. Revolutionary War. The Declaration of Independence triggered the Revolutionary War between the United States and Great Britain, which lasted until 1783. The war was marked by battles between the Continental Army, led by George Washington, and British forces. Treaty of Paris. The 1783 Treaty of Paris brought an end to the Revolutionary War, and Great Britain recognized the independence of the United States of America. The treaty also gave the new nation control of vast territories west of the Mississippi River. Articles of Confederation, 1781-1789. Weak central government. Following the Revolutionary War, the United States was governed as a loose confederation of unions under the Articles of Confederation. The Articles gave little power to the central government and allowed each state to make its own laws and collect its own taxes. Internal troubles. The Confederation period was characterized by economic troubles and internal conflicts. There were disputes between the states, and the central government was unable to resolve them. Constitutional Congress, 1787. Formation of the Constitution. The growing discontent of the states over the weak central government led to the convening of the Constitutional Convention in 1787. The Congress drafted a new constitution, which was ratified in 1788. Strong central government. The U.S. Constitution differed significantly from the Articles of Confederation and established a strong central government. The Constitution created a president, a Congress, and a Supreme Court. Bill of Rights, 1791. Protection of individual rights. After the adoption of the U.S. Constitution, the first 10 amendments or Bill of Rights were adopted. The Bill of Rights protects fundamental rights such as freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and the right to bear arms. Republican era, 1789 to 1829. First presidents. George Washington was elected the first president of the United States in 1789. He was followed by John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, and James Monroe. These presidents played an important role in shaping the new nation and developing its political, economic, and social institutions. Louisiana Purchase, 1803. Westward expansion. In 1803, the United States bought the Louisiana Territory from France for $15 million. This purchase doubled the country's territory and paved the way for westward expansion. War of 1812. War with Britain. In 1812, the United States once again went to war with Britain. The war was marked by Britain's naval blockade and its alliance with Native American tribes in the United States. The Treaty of Ghent, signed in 1815, ended the war and led to little change in territorial boundaries. Jacksonian period, 1829-1850. The rise of the common man. In the 1820s and 1830s, the United States saw a major shift in its political and economic landscape. The common man rose and populist candidates like Andrew Jackson came to power. Expansion westward. The Jacksonian era was characterized by a rapid continuation of westward expansion. Native American peoples were increasingly forced off their lands as the United States expanded. Mexican-American War, 1846-1848. Addition of the Southwest. In the late 1840s, the United States fought a war with Mexico over Texas and other southwestern territories. The war ended in victory for the United States, and the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo ceded to Mexico the southwestern portion of what is now the United States. Period of the Flailing 50s, 1850-1861. The slavery debate. Following the Mexican-American War, the slavery debate began to divide the United States. While many in the North opposed slavery, slave owners in the South fiercely defended the institution. Slaving Hands Movement. In the 1850s, the Bubbling Hands Act was passed, prohibiting the expansion of slavery into new territories of the United States. The law led to a fierce division between supporters and opponents of slavery. United States Civil War, 1861-1865. Secession. In 1860, with the election of Abraham Lincoln as president, 7 southern states seceded from the Union. These states formed the Confederate States, and the United States Civil War began. Civil War. The Civil War was the bloodiest conflict in the history of the United States. The war was marked by 4 years of fighting between the Union Army and the Confederate Army. Declaration of Independence, 1863. In 1863, Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, which freed slaves in Confederate states and in Confederate territory under Union military control. The Emancipation Proclamation turned the tide of the war and contributed to the North's victory. Reconstruction, 1865 and 1877. The Civil War led to a significant social and economic transformation in the South that necessitated Reconstruction. Reconstruction included the emancipation of slaves, the readmission of Southern states to the Union, and an increased presence of the federal government in the South. V. Industrial Revolution and Urbanization, 19th century. A. Industrial Revolution. In the second half of the 19th century, the United States experienced the Industrial Revolution. This revolution led to significant advances in production methods and technology, and helped the country quickly become an industrial power. B. Urbanization. The Industrial Revolution led to a massive influx of population into cities. By the end of the 19th century, cities like Chicago, New York, and San Francisco had grown into large metropolitan areas. Key migration. The Industrial Revolution and the growth of cities attracted a huge wave of foreign immigrants. Between 1840 and 1920, more than 35 million people migrated from Europe to the United States. V. Imperialism and international relations, 19th, 20th century. A. Spanish-American War, 1898. In the late 19th century, the United States intervened in a war between Cuba and Spain. The Spanish-American War ended in victory for the United States and led to the acquisition of control over Puerto Rico, Guam, the Philippines, and Cuba. Philippine-American War, 1899-1902. The annexation of the Philippines by the United States led to a rebellion by the Filipino people for independence. The Philippine-American War ended in victory for the United States but damaged the country's reputation. Monroe Doctrine. In 1823, James Monroe, President of the United States of America, issued the Monroe Doctrine. The doctrine was designed to dissuade European powers from further intervention in the Western Hemisphere. World War II, 1941-1945. In 1941, Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor brought the United States into World War II. The war ended in an Allied victory and the United States emerged as a superpower, forcing post-war period. Following the Revolutionary War, the United States entered the challenging post-war period. It was marked by economic challenges facing the new nation, continued tensions with Britain, and efforts to establish a new system of government. Economic difficulties. The Revolutionary War devastated the American economy. Trade had been disrupted during the war, and agricultural production had fallen dramatically. By the end of the war, the country had accumulated a huge national debt, and the currency was becoming worthless. 1. Foreign debt. The United States had borrowed heavily from its allies during the Revolutionary War. These debts put a heavy burden on the new nation and hindered its economic growth. Devaluation of domestic currency. During the Revolutionary War, Congress issued a continental currency, but this currency quickly became worthless because the government printed too much of it. This caused inflation and made it harder for people to buy basic necessities. 3. Trade restrictions. Following the Revolutionary War, Britain imposed trade restrictions against the United States. These restrictions restricted access to American products and reduced the country's exports. Tensions with Britain. Although the Revolutionary War ended, tensions between the U.S. and Britain remained high. 1. Border disputes. In the post-war period, there were disputes between the U.S. and the U.K. over where the border with Canada was located. These disputes led to increased tensions between the two countries. 2. British military presence. After the Revolutionary War, Britain continued to maintain troops at some U.S. border points. This presence signaled continued British influence on American soil and caused anger in the U.S. Indian raids. The British took advantage of tensions between the United States and Britain to instigate Indian raids against the United States. These raids caused casualties among American settlers and contributed to increased tensions. Establishment of a new system of government. After the Revolutionary War, the United States faced the challenge of establishing a new system of government. 1. Articles of Confederation. In the early years of the Revolutionary War, the Confederation of States had an extremely loose central authority. The states were given broad powers and the powers of the federal government were limited. 2. Constitutional Convention. The weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation led to the convening of the Constitutional Convention in 1787. The convention created a new constitution that increased the powers of the central government and subordinated the states to the state. 3. Ratification of the Constitution. The Constitution was ratified in 1788 and gave more powers to the federal government. This was an important turning point in the history of the United States of America and ensured that the country would be a strong and lasting union. Vicky, expansion and migration to the West. In the 19th century, the United States significantly expanded its territory and witnessed a great wave of westward migration. A. Louisiana Purchase. In 1803, the United States acquired the Louisiana Territory from France. This purchase doubled the country's territory and paved the way for westward expansion. Lewis and Clark Expedition. In 1804, Lewis and Clark organized an expedition to explore the Louisiana Territory. The expedition explored the natural resources and native tribes of the region and paved the way for westward expansion. C. Westward migration. Following the Louisiana Purchase and the Lewis and Clark expedition, the United States experienced a significant wave of westward migration. Settlers moved westward in search of new opportunities and land. 1. Expansion of the frontier. The influx of immigrants led to the westward expansion of the American frontier. Settlers created new states and brought the land under U.S. control. 2. Forced migration of Native Americans. The westward expansion of American settlers had devastating consequences for Native Americans. Native Americans were dispossessed of their land and many tribes were forced to migrate. D. Mexican-American War. In 1846, the United States declared war on Mexico. The war resulted in the annexation of large parts of Mexico by the United States. First, California. Gold rush. In 1848, gold was discovered in California, leading to a great wave of westward migration. Gold prospectors flocked to California in the hope of making a fortune and building a new life. 2. Accession of new states. Westward expansion led to new states joining the Union. By the mid-19th century, 31 new states were added to the U.S. The Civil War. In the mid-19th century, the issue of slavery plunged the United States into the Civil War.